TrueFire Live here with Rob Garland. Man, Rob is one of my favorite people on the planet for an endless variety of reasons. We started working with Rob, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago. He started up one of our very first online classrooms, one of the most popular classrooms, by the way. Rob moved here to the States from England in '99 after he completed, he got a degree in music, radio, and film. Played hundreds and hundreds of gigs on the college circuit there. But once he was in the States, he formed a band, Rob Garland and the Blue Monks. They played tons of gigs at clubs and festivals all around the States. He opened for the likes of B.B. King, Chuck Berry, and Booker T, which itself is a pretty incredible testimonial. Their record, when it's all said and done, got airplay on international radio and TV stations. Also a pretty miraculous feat today. Rob currently lives in LA, plays and records with a fusion power trio, Rob Garland's Eclectic Trio, and his jazz band Catatonic. Rob is, for any of you who might already know him, very, very passionate about education and a prolific publisher of educational content. He teaches at GIT. He's published books for Cherry Lane. He's got 5 TrueFire courses in the library already on topics ranging from CAGED chords, the pentatonic major scale, songwriting, and chord tones. And he's just finished filming 2 new courses here in the studios this week. Chord Navigator CAGED 7ths and a Take 5 on chord tone soloing. Let's see if we can interrupt this beautiful solo from Rob and talk a little bit with him. That was a chord tone.
That was a chord tone.
How you doing, man?
Brad. I'm good, thank you.
So
great to be here.
We can't figure out. It's like 7 years, 8 years, maybe.
Yeah, something like that.
You were one of the early adopters of the crazy online classroom concept back in the day.
Yes.
And of course, we very much appreciate that. Mm-hmm. And you've done, I don't know, like I said, we've got 5 courses in the library today. You just completed 2 more.
Yep.
And I'd love to be able to get through, kind of showing off what we've done in those 2 courses in the limited time we have.
Sure.
You up for that?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Let's see. Let's start with Chord Navigator. I love the Chord Navigator series. The first one was on triads, right?
Correct, yeah.
Define triads for everyone first.
Well, triads is basically just a 3-note chord. So you have a major triad, which is a root, a third, and a fifth, or a minor triad, a root, a flat third, and a fifth. And triads are the foundation of everything you play on the guitar. So it's pretty powerful stuff.
Yeah. So a lot of folks, I guess understand what a triad is, but still seem to lean to playing bigger voiced chords, with 6-string roots. And why explain why playing triads as a comping or rhythm tool is a good thing.
Well, because a lot of people, like if you see this big C chord here, okay, a lot of people think of that as a C chord, a bar chord, it's a C chord, but what they don't realize is they're playing 6 strings and then just looping the same note over and over again. A C chord is basically a C, an E, and a G. And when you play this big chord like this, you're playing a C, a G, a C, an E, another G, and another C. So you could just take the 3 strings, for example, D, G, and B strings, and that gives you the same thing, a C chord. Now, why would you want to do that? Because it gives you other fingers free to do those little flourishes and little double stops. Everything we heard in Curtis Mayfield through Jimi Hendrix, Steve Cropper, to today, to John Mayer and, current players as well. It's all the same material being recycled. And so if you're able to play these sparser voicings, it also helps you play with bands or even jam tracks where you can find your place in the mix, because this big chord sounds kind of muddy after a while, So if you're able to just pick out 3 strings, you can play the chord and embellish around it. Great for intros, second guitar parts, trio work, the list goes on.
and it doesn't tick off the bass players in the band.
Exactly, and you've got to keep the bass player happy, you know.
They don't want you hitting those 5th and 6th string roots, right?
Exactly.
That's their job. That's what they're getting paid for,
don't
right?
do that, and don't date their girlfriends, I'd imagine.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
So the thing that I think most students, you know, as they're starting to learn the guitar, we all start with the bigger voice chords,
Yes,
right?
of course.
And then we watch our favorite players, and we see them doing these chords that aren't the big chords we know, right? The bar chords.
Right.
And we think there's some kind of like fancy, you know, voicing. They're just triads mostly.
Right.
Like a lot of that Hendrix stuff, as you just said, are, you know, triple stops, you know, triads.
Right, exactly. Yeah, it is. And I think part of the problem is a lot of us grow up thinking that the rhythm is happening over there and the lead is happening over there, and never the two shall talk to each other. But what actually happens is when you discover that there's so much information in these basic chord shapes, you know, the basic open shapes is where the CAGED system comes from. You know, so we have our word CAGED, C, A, G, E, D, and then we transfer that up the neck. You know, and so for example, if you wanted to play G, D, and C, let's say, you could play it all in the same spot on the neck. You know, here I'm going to use a C-shaped chord, but it's a G. How do I know it's a G? Because the bass note I would have played my C chord on, the A string, where I would have had the note C, now is the note G, and everything else stays the same. If you've ever used a capo, it's the same concept. You're just basically making, I call this, you know, the poor man's capo. You're using your first finger as the capo. And so once you have that chord, you can then strip away the other strings and just use what you need. So G, D, C could be G, D, C. And it keeps it all in the same spot on the neck, keeps it very connected, and it's very musical, frankly, you know.
So what you've done with Chord Navigator is taken the CAGED system and the concept of triads and kind of bridge them together to show folks how to kind of comp or play rhythm parts anywhere on the neck.
Anywhere on the neck. And in the CAGED Navigator Volume 1, CAGED Triads, we used major triads, minor triads, augmented, and diminished, which gets you through, you know, 95% of all songs ever written. You know.
So let's do this. Just because you went through it a little bit fast, I want to make sure anyone that's not familiar with the CAGED system, show them the E and how that transforms into...
So if you have an E chord, you have your open E chord. And the thing about the word CAGED is it always stays the same no matter which chord you start with. So as long as you can spell the word CAGED, you're in good shape. So if we get to E, you know, in CAGED, the next letter of the word is D. So what we have to do is, how would you play a D chord? You'd play a D chord in the open position like this, but then we need to play it as an E because now we've already played our E voicing, so we need a D voicing. So we take the D chord shape, but use the bass note of E. Because when you play a D chord down here, the bass note is actually the open D. We just don't think about it like that, you know? So you shift it up, and there's our E chord with a D voicing.
So most of us, you know, came up learning bar chords. Which the E, let's say the 6-string root major chord, the E shape, the bar chord is actually one of the CAGED shapes.
It is, and the other one is the A shape, which you tend to use all the time. So if we were going to play basically this one, right? So if we were going to play an E chord, some people play it like this, some people use 3 fingers, but however you want to play it, that is the A shape. And the reason it's the A shape is because this bar right here is how you would play A in the open position.
That's right. So it's like your finger becomes the capo.
Finger becomes, moves up, and then...
And what most of us didn't learn back in the day is how to do that with the C chord or the D chord or even some of the other, you know, the minor chords or 7th chords.
Exactly.
So just show the C chord again and move it up the neck.
So here's open C, okay? And then think about the word CAGED. The next letter is A. So what's an A chord look like? The bass note is C. The chord is the same as the A form. If you get confused, which string is the bass note for an A chord on? Obviously the A string. So there's your C, okay? The next one, C, A, G, is a G form. Now this one, you might look at it and go, well, that looks terrifying, and you'd be right. It's not a comfortable form. However, you never are really going to play this entire form. What you need is the visualization of what it looks like, and then you can extract all that cool Hendrix stuff from it, because that's a G shape, even though most people play it like, right? Really, that's a G shape. We're just playing 3 of the strings or 4 of the strings of it, right? And you also, a lot of those fills, all that stuff comes from the pentatonic scale. And when you delve into CAGED, you'll see that the pentatonic scale fits right into it. So, you know, there's 5 pentatonic shapes, 5 major scale shapes, 5 CAGED chord shapes. So there's a big demystification that happens, and your fretboard knowledge really does jump with this stuff.
Yeah, so
there's our G shape.
Yep.
All right. And then the C shape, the C chord next will be an E shape. Okay. Because there's our E chord form, but our bass note is a C. And then, so now we've gone C, we've gone A form, we've gone G form, E form, and then the last one will be the D form. And again, you wouldn't necessarily play it like that with the bass note in it, but you see it as a visual, and then you could...
So the beauty, and this is one of the many reasons we love you as much as we do. You have, you know, a great talent for demystifying certain concepts that can be, you know, very, very confusing. If you, you know, the CAGED system can be very confusing if you've never, but you not only take, kind of lift the hood on the CAGED system, you show us how to apply it in a, you know, real life, musical, cool way. Okay? And, do me a favor. Can you roll a track from the first course, Triads, and show them a musical application?
Yeah, let's do a really simple one. Let's just do 3 chords. So if Tommy's got that, we can do G, D, and C. And I'll just play G, D, and C in a couple of different places on the neck using the CAGED triads. So here it is with open chords, just so you can hear it. G, D, C. So now let's go to somewhere else on the neck. So G, D, C, G, D, C. Let's go to the higher strings. G, D, C. Open down here. G, D, C. Higher strings. And now let's embellish a little bit. So all of that is G, D, C. Yeah.
Awesome. So CAGED system and triads.
Yeah, and a good way to look at it as well is it keeps you in the same spot on the neck as well. So if you have 2 guitar players in a band, or maybe a guitar player and a piano player or keyboard player, you know, you're not getting in each other's way. You can keep your voicings nice and closely related, you know, which makes them sound more musical as a whole and connects with whatever song you're playing over as well.
The you know, the cool thing about both this course, the one that's already available, and the one we'll show them in a minute, it really is the key to everything you hear. You know, the Memphis sound, the Hendrix thing, R&B, soul, all those wonderful fills and all that great comping work all stems from, you know, and a lot of folks that play that way might not even, you know, related to the CAGED system, might not even relate it to triads, but that's what it is. And, you know, that's what
those great
you're
rhythm
showing
players like
in those courses.
Yeah, those great rhythm players like Steve Cropper and those kind of guys with all the Motown and the funk and the soul. Yeah, they might not call it CAGED, and it's not you know, a necessity to call it anything. But as educators, we need to, you know, get it across in the quickest, most
analyze
effective
it, break
way.
it down. Well, you do a great job at that, man. Do you play one more thing from the first course, and then we'll talk about the one we did this week.
Okay, yeah. Actually, if you have the track, I'll do it with the track so you can really hear it. There's a progression that combines major and minor chords. It's a little bit more complex.
Yeah.
And another thing that this CAGED stuff gives you is voice leading, meaning you can have a note that walks through the chords. And and again, it's just a tool to make your playing sound more connected and more musical.
Now, in the first course, you covered major, minor.
Yep.
What else in the first
augmented, diminished, and suspended.
Okay. So that's all in Chord Navigator Triads, the first edition.
That's correct, yeah.
Go ahead and play this.
Yeah. C chord, G chord, G minor chord, F chord, F minor, C chord, D7, F, C. And that's where you get all the little rhythmic, just very simple parts. And in that example, so you couldn't do this with the big chords because you'd be going C, G, and they sound too big. Because I stripped them down to inversions and just used 3 strings, I was able to make a bass line that worked its way through all the chords. And so on. So that voice leading became available because I used small CAGED triads. And for songwriting, that's really useful too.
Nice. So this week we did another edition of Chord Navigator.
We did.
On sevenths.
Yes, that's correct. So that's major sevenths, minor sevenths, and dominant sevenths.
Cool. Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so basically the same concept applied. So if you've already seen the first course, this one's going to be pretty easy to digest in terms of the way it's laid out because we really followed the same template. Essentially, if I take a C chord, okay, so we already know that's a triad, and now I want to make that into a 4-note chord, I'm going to add a 7th. And now I've done that. So instead of just C, E, and G, now I've added a B, C, E, G, and B, and that makes them major sevenths. And so once we have the open shape, we can take our CAGED system through the word CAGED using major sevenths. So there's a C major 7 using a C shape. Here's a C major 7 using an A major 7 shape. Here's a C major 7 using a G major 7 shape. Here's a C major 7 using an E major 7 shape, and then finally here's a C major 7 using a D major 7 shape. So in the same way we would play C, A, G, E, D in the open position, we just add a major 7 to each of those chord shapes and they become movable in those 5 CAGED positions. And we can repeat the process for minor 7 and dominant 7 as well.
Nice. You call a track and show us what you can do with it.
Okay, so I have one that I nicknamed Nearly Dan. So if any of you want to guess what that is, Brad will give you a prize of no monetary value whatsoever. So let's have a go at Nearly Dan. This combines major 7 and minor 7 chords using CAGED shapes.
No one's chatted a guess yet.
Wow.
Come on, guys. Let's go.
major 7, minor 7, major 7, minor 7, major 7, minor 7. And then in much smaller voice things, major 7, minor 7, major 7, minor 7, major 7, minor 7. And again, it allows me to embellish. So that's just moving through just a couple of major minor.
We have a
chords.
lot of correct guesses.
Ah, okay.
That means that Zach, I think you need to give folks some kind of love. I don't know, promo code on his courses or something like that. Good job.
They guessed it was ABBA. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah, exactly, ABBA. Hey, let me tell you, and I want you to shout out to all your friends in Poland, Los Angeles, Scotland, France, Ohio, Pennsylvania, Fort Collins, Colorado. I can't actually pronounce this area of Southern Africa. I don't want to insult anybody, but you've got quite a lot of fans all over the world here, man.
Thank you. I really appreciate you guys tuning in. It means a lot to me, so thank you.
Yeah, and if we haven't called out where you're from, please shout in. We always strive to get at least one person from every time zone and every continent. Okay?
Yes. Yeah, maybe we'll get someone from Mars today. You never know.
You never know. I think we have a student up there because they just got internet. Okay. A couple of quick questions,
yes,
and then we'll go talk about the other course. What is the best exercise for finger endurance?
Finger endurance.
Endurance.
I find when I teach, I'm a big fan of teaching anything that can be applied musically. To me, there's only so many hours in the day. So when I do technique work with students, I try to give them things they can actually apply. And one of my favorite ones is to take a major scale, such as the C major scale, and make an overlapping sequence out of it. So I might do thirds, and so on. So I play the note of the scale, ascend a third, go down to the next note of the scale, ascend a third from that, keeping it diatonic. So major third, minor third, major third, and so on. And I find if I do that in the 5 major scale positions, which of course match the 5 CAGED positions, that's a really good one for building up your finger strength and endurance. And where the musical application comes in, if I was soloing over a song in C major, I could actually use just a small bit of that. You know, I wouldn't use the whole thing because it would sound too much like an exercise, but especially if you had some rhythm to it. You know, so therefore, none of that technique practice has gone wasted in terms of being able to apply it musically. So that one, you know, and thirds was just the first thing I thought of. You could do fourths or fifths. You could do a sequence where you ascend a few notes, like 4 notes, go back a note, and so on. And then, of course, use that in a song, you know, just that much of it. You know, so it's a good little exercise. Try in different scale positions, different sequences, and I guarantee your finger strength will build up doing that. Plus, you can use it musically as well.
Very cool. Italy, New York City, Weston, Florida, Boca, Florida, Sweden, Virginia, New Hampshire, Texas, Vancouver, Canada. One of my favorite places on the planet. Iceland, New Jersey, of course, in the house, Staten Island, all chimed in as well. Thank you, guys. We love to hear from you all.
Any Brits?
No Brits.
That is terrible. Come on, Britain.
Yeah, that's kind of insulting.
It is
all
very
things
insulting.
Considered.
Yeah.
You must have a couple of friends.
I'll probably
left
have
over
a
there.
silent tear after the session, to be honest.
So, you know, I try not to get too gratuitous, you know, about our courses and stuff.
Yeah.
You know, it's hard to do that with these two chord navigator courses because, a lot of our courses are very specialized on a technique or on a style, which, is a preference thing, right? These two courses, and that's why we were so excited to have you come back and do the sevenths, which have been, long overdue here, are so critical. That understanding, whether you learn them from Rob's courses here on TrueFire, or you tune into his channel or his classroom, or you even do privates, I think,
I do, yeah.
or learn them on your own. CAGED system, triads, using them for comping, using them for fills is, it's essential. Actually, we were writing copy about this course, and it's like just an essential rhythm guitar skill. So we urge you to do it. However you do it, you got to jump on that stuff.
As an example, so I could be teaching at MI and I'm teaching CAGED chords. I could go to a band rehearsal and it could be any different style of music. I'm probably like 99% I'm going to be using CAGED chords, CAGED sevenths in those contexts. And then maybe I'll go and I do a session, CAGED chords. If somebody wants country, it's CAGED chords. They want pop. I mean, it is the system that keeps on
and
giving.
And you focus on a variety of styles to show how versatile it is. And I guess a little tip for anyone that goes out to the local jam, gets together with their buds, do not use those 6-string rooted bar chords that we all grew up with. You cannot do that. Someone else will be doing that.
Exactly. You be the guy that goes up the neck.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, the other course we did was Take 5 on chord tone soloing. And this is also kind of, an essential skill if you're composing a melody, crafting a solo, or even improvising. So talk about, talk about the notion of chord tone soloing. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so what I mean by that is if you take any chord, take a really simple chord, like a C chord, okay? So as I said earlier, that C chord is made up of 3 chord tones, C, E, and G. And, if you know anything about the layout of the fretboard, those 3 notes, they just keep repeating all over the neck. So if you know that those 3 notes are in the chord, doesn't it make the most sense in the world if you're playing a solo or writing a melody or trying to get a melodic theme going to hit 1, 2, or all 3 of those notes, because it's going to lock you in with the chord, no doubt about it. Now, where people get confused about it is they think that chord tones are playing an arpeggio in order, like, right? But that's not what I mean at all. You can play chord tones, you can spread them out, you can connect them with a scale, and it's how you go about playing them. I mean, if I played C, E, G like that, I could slide between them. Now that doesn't sound like, but I'm still playing chord tones. I mean, great melodic players like Brian May or Jeff Beck, David Gilmour, these guys are hitting chord tones. They may not be thinking about theoretically that they're hitting chord tones because they don't have to teach it to anybody else. They don't necessarily want to teach to someone else. But, I mean, they are doing it because it's ear. So what we're doing is preparing, myself included, all of our ears to be able to hear these beautiful melodic chord tones.
Can you pull an example from the course? These Take 5s we do, a basic, and then we kind of progressively get a little more sophisticated across 5 performance studies.
Why don't we start with the basic one?
Cool.
That's, and I'll just say before we do it, the chords are, because there's only 4 chords in this one, the chords are A, going to E, going to F sharp minor, going to D. So all I'm going to do is play a chord tone out of each of those chords, and you should hear that I lock in with the chord progression. Let's roll the track. So C sharp to E, that's the third and the fifth of the first chord. The second chord, I played a B, which is the fifth of the E chord. The third chord, I played an A, which is the third of the F sharp minor chord. And the last chord, I played an F sharp and a D, which is the third and the root of the chord. Now you could take the track away and you'll still hear those chords, right? Right, so except for me missing the last note, you can pretty much hear that those notes are in those chords, and that's the beauty of this. If you play over a jam track and it sounds quite melodic, that's great. But if you can take that jam track away and still hear the changes because you're using chord tones, imagine how melodic it will sound when you bring the jam track back or you play with a band.
I mean, it's crazy. We had Cheryl Bailey in here a couple weeks ago, okay? And we had a little snafu. She was soloing over, standard jazz changes, okay? And we lost somehow or another the backing track. We could hear it here, she could hear it, but you couldn't. It wasn't being broadcast. Okay, things like that can happen from time to time when you're live. So we went back and listened to it. You could absolutely. There was no backing track, no chords.
Sure,
you could absolutely hear the chord changes in her solo, and that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, especially great jazz players like that, because jazz players are literally spelling out the chord tones of every chord. They're not really going to a scale at all usually.
No, they do not run scales.
And so one thing about that, how would you connect those chord tones? Well, because that song was for that example, that song's in A major, I was just using the A major pentatonic scale to connect the chord tones. But if I just played the scale up and down, it would sound like I was running a scale, and it wouldn't necessarily have the melodic content.
Right.
So it's like you can use the scale as a bass, but of course, if you use this course and combine your CAGED triad knowledge, then you're really onto something.
Yeah.
Because the CAGED chords, the chord tones are lighting up inside those. What a great Christmas present the two together could be.
More gratuitous advertising, but it's fine. That's the author. That's the educator. So, the key, I think, is you lay it out in the first section of Take 5. You really give a nice primer on how to identify the chord tones and how to work them out.
Yeah.
And you're right, and we've talked about extending Chord Navigator, or the CAGED system into more of like a soloing dimension.
Yeah.
Because absolutely, those are the chord tones.
Yeah, I mean, I could take that a step further. If I just take one chord, for example, if I just take this G chord, right, which is a C shape from Chord Navigator, inside that chord shape alone, I can see the chord tones, which is an arpeggio in itself. I could see a major pentatonic scale. I could see a major scale. I could see different arpeggios if I wanted a jazzy major 7. So and so on and so on. I could see every triad of the key is inside that CAGED chord. So I mean, it just doesn't stop. There's so much information inside one of those shapes. And of course, the more time you think about, it's not a bad thing to really start thinking about what the chord tones of chords are.
Right.
I mean, if you're sitting in traffic for an hour, what's a C chord? Okay.
Right.
What's a D minor chord? Oh, the lights changed.
Right.
But it's because the more you think of that stuff, the more it will translate easily. And you can grab those chord tones.
As I mentioned earlier, as you can tell, Rob is a walking encyclopedia of cool knowledge you absolutely must know.
Not a little bit, but
you're incredible, man. So can you pull one of the other tracks from the course and
let's
step
take one
up the level a little bit?
Let's go right up there. Let's go to say level 4, which is a 6/8 blues ballad kind of thing. And this one's a strange one because it starts on the 4 chord. So again, if you were just soloing over this with a pentatonic scale, because as soon as somebody hears the word blues, they think, oh, I'll just grab a pentatonic scale. You would get into a little trouble with this if you just tried to outline these changes with a pentatonic scale. So let's see if we can pull some chord tones out of this one, the level 4 blues jam 6/8. So just real quickly on that one, you know, I'm literally pulling those chord tones from the chord voicings. You know, I'm seeing a D chord going to a D minor chord. So I want to hear the third. But again, you know, borrowing from those great lyrical players like Jeff Beck or Larry Carlton, you know, instead of just playing, we're bending a half step and slurring, and it just makes it much more expressive sounding. But we're hitting those chord tones, you know, and that's what brings out the changes.
And, you know, as I'm sure you all just noticed, while Rob certainly has a lot of fancy blazing technique, you know, that solo was perfect. You know, it just sounded great. Listeners would love to listen to that. You don't need to do a lot of blazing technique to have a kind of a great melodic improvisation or great solo. And, you know, you're unlocking that here with this particular chord soloing.
Right. Yeah, I think it's the thing that I've noticed with a lot of students that have come to me over the years that have said they're frustrated with, you know, they've reached a plateau, a pentatonic plateau, if you will, is that if you sort of lead them in the direction of a few of these chord tones, it's not that big of a jump. It's not like they have to go away for 20 years and practice with a metronome to do this. You know, just a little bit more fretboard knowledge and a little bit more of understanding of you know, of where those chords are and the notes inside them. Yeah. And you can start adding this into your playing very easily. In fact, I have another, apologize for the sales, but it is relevant. I have a TrueFire course that I did, a Foundry course.
That's right.
Which is all about blues chord tones specifically.
Yes.
So,
yeah, and that's very popular here as well. That was the Foundry one.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And you also have the, what was the name of that one? I love that one. I worked with it myself.
Pentathlon.
The guitarist Pentathlon.
Yeah, that one.
Know?
Yeah.
That's
a good
awesome
name.
as well. Just quickly tell them about that.
That one was basically for people that have been playing the pentatonic for 150 years, you know, like Yoda, and they sort of got stuck in the patterns, and it was just ways of saying, you know, there are other ways to use this same scale, playing it off of different chords and customizing it a little bit, you know, breathing new life into it.
Very cool.
Was the line we used, you know.
So let me give you some feedback from your live audience here. Number one, Matt says, I don't think any Brits are on because EastEnders was on when he started.
That's brilliant. EastEnders is for those that don't know, EastEnders is a soap opera set in the East End of London, and it's one of the most depressing television programs you will ever see. So there you go. Nothing happy happens in that show.
And also we have,
thanks, Matt.
Let's see. Oh, Void Where Prohibited. says, I saw Rob play to a packed house last week at the Baked Potato.
Wow, that's awesome to mention that. That was
in
a
Hollywood,
real
great
thrill.
band, great music. You just told me about that.
I just told you about that.
That was
yeah.
a club you really want to. Yeah,
that was my second time playing
but
there.
you didn't tell me it was packed, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was packed.
Well,
yeah.
Come on.
That was my second time playing
To
there.
pack the Baked Potato. That's awesome.
It was my second time playing there. And quick funny story. When I was at college, friends of mine were listening to the pop music of the day, you know, Duran Duran, Tears for Fears, all great stuff.
Yeah.
I was getting bootlegs sent over from Japan of like Landau and Larry Carlton and Steve Lukather, the Baked Potato. So
That's
to me,
right.
that was a real dream come true.
It's one of those places.
It is one of those places. There's magic in that place.
So more folks chiming in: Idaho, Netherlands, Atlanta, Lebanon, Thailand, India, Montreal, Tampa Bay, Germany, Holland, New Zealand. Arthur's having breakfast right now.
What's he having?
What are you having, Arthur?
I had a fantastic omelette today, Arthur, but carry on.
And let's see. Did I say Holland? Holland's there. Still nobody from Britain, and I'm waiting for there's a player in Antarctica.
Maybe Brexit finally happened. Let's hope not.
Well, let's hopefully. I don't know how the EastEnders are doing right now, but you know, if there's a pause in the action, maybe they'll tune in really quickly.
An action is a very generous term of you for EastEnders, to be honest.
We've got about 15, 20 minutes left.
Okay.
Guys, shout out with any questions you have.
Yeah.
Let me toss a few questions your way. This is an interesting one. Henry is asking, I'm assuming one can apply the CAGED system on a guitar tuned in fifths?
Well, yes, but if you're, I mean, let's think about that. What, completely tuning fifths, I assume he means.
Apparently, and then parenthetically he says new standard tuning.
Okay. So my response would be, you'd have to have your own CAGED system, wouldn't you? Really, I mean, you'd have to think about what does your open chord look like. If you have an open chord that you're used to now, then you're still. I mean, even in an alternate tuning, you're still using the same basic forms that you've come up with for that tuning, or maybe I mean, like Joni Mitchell had about 40 of them, and so you would have those forms, and so if you can play those forms in the open position of that tuned guitar, you can move them.
Right.
I mean, nothing's going to change.
Won't be
is it?
called the CAGED system, but the application pretty much remains the same.
It does,
right?
yeah. It's just that your C shape might look. I can't work it out. Your C shape might look a little different. Because of the fifths. But yeah, you should be able to have your basic forms and move them. So I would think so. Yeah.
So there you go. Report back as to what you would call that system.
Yeah. Send me an email. I'd like to hear about that. Actually,
go.
that's interesting to me.
Paul asks how you choose an order of chords. I think you use circle of fifths, but do you have some favorite ways of doing it to make it sound so mellow?
You mean when writing chord progressions?
I think he's asking about, when you put progressions, or if you're writing a song, how are you determining what chord follows?
I do it in two ways. By the way, there's a bunch of my music on Spotify if anyone wants to actually listen to the composition.
And another gratuitous ad.
Yeah, but it's Spotify. It's not like I'm going to make any money out of it.
You'll make a fraction of a penny, maybe.
Exactly, yeah. I do it two ways. Often I'll just be working on something else, and something will come out, like this chord progression came out. Kind of a strange one, right? So you couldn't really sit down and write that. And so that just sort of came out. And then I heard a melodic line that I could use as a melody to connect those chords together. And so then once the melodic line came together, I moved the chords around a little bit to fit the line. So I guess what I'm saying, that one was all ear. Now, you can also sit down and do it purely theory-based as well. You can absolutely use a circle of fourths or fifths, depending which way you go. And you can write like that. I like to do a little of both. I think but I like the idea that, the thing about theory is I like theory a lot, but I played for many years in bands not knowing anything. And then one day I just kind of got the bug. I really want to understand this stuff. And sometimes you hear people say, oh, if you learn it, I'll lose my feel. And I couldn't disagree more with that. I think what it does is it enhances it. But my advice is you practice it, and then you go to the gig and you don't think. You just play. At the gig, you need to play. At home, you can think about it. So for composition, I like to use both of those philosophies. Sometimes I'll just be playing and I go, oh, that's kind of cool, and then I'll follow it wherever it leads, just using my ear. And then other times I might sit down and go, I'm going to start with a 1-6-2-5, and then I'll see what happens from there. A good way to just follow your ear is our friend with the alternate tunings as well. If you tune into Dadgad or some great tuning, that's a nice way to get you out of thinking about what you're doing.
I know, that's a lot of fun. Do you know that Axis? I think it's Axis of Awesome video on YouTube that went kind of viral. They took the 1-5-6-4 progression, and they played in over a couple of minutes a little bit of like 72 hit pop songs.
Oh yeah, I bet.
So another great way. It's just there are basically 20 or 25. Let's call it popular progressions that have fueled tens of thousands of songs.
Yeah, and if you just take, if you took a 1-6-2-5, for example, like it could be, if you mute pick it, it sounds like the 50s, right?
Yeah.
But if the same thing could be. Or it could be like, that's three very different sounds from the same four chords.
That's a great answer to that question. Do that same progression using the CAGED system.
Well, I already did. The jazz one was using the CAGED.
There you go.
In fact, that could have come straight out of our course today because that's an E major 7 voicing. I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah.
Going to a dominant 7 voicing out of E7 dominant voicing to an A minor 7 voicing back to a dominant voicing again. So that's what I was doing. But I mean, I could also do that. I could just do that on the high strings. Right? And then I need an A7. Then I need a D minor. Then I need a G9. So keeping the voicings closer. See, what's interesting about that, the way I played it first, they weren't particularly close, and it was only when I took your CAGED advice that they became closer. So there you go. Yeah.
Nice. A couple more questions?
Sure.
Well, this is interesting. Russ asks, and in a way, you answered this already, but I think you should answer it again. How do you approach lead guitar over many chord changes?
Okay, so the big lesson for that is, there are certain when I first started getting into jazzier styles, and I'm by no means a jazz player. I just want to be someday. But when I playing over jazzier styles. It occurred to me that there is such a thing as vocabulary for jazz changes. Even though we're improvising, there is actually a vocabulary. And how I really realized that was one of those great remasters that came out of the old John Coltrane and Miles Davis records. And they would put the alternate takes. And on the alternate takes, you would hear some of the same lines. And I'd be like, oh, okay, interesting. So it wasn't just completely falling out of the air. So there are these certain devices. Like, for example, if I had E minor 7 to A7 to D minor 7 to G7, and I played like... something like that, like some sort of diminished line or something. You can take these little 2-5-1s and these little bits of vocabulary and recycle them. But probably the best answer I can give you for that question is don't play over every chord. That's the big answer for that one. Because often, when there's a lot of changes, 2 or 3 of those chords in a row are in the same key. A lot of saxophone players, when they're playing over a 2 and a 5 chord, they'll only pick one of those 2 chords. They're like, I'm just going to focus on the 5, or I'll just focus on the 2, Dorian or Mixolydian mode. And so you don't have to play over every chord. And so if you're playing a chord tone line, what you want to do is, like, if you're playing over E minor into A7, right? And then you're going to go D minor to G7, how about you just ignore the D minor? So E minor, right? Now we'll just ignore the D7 completely and then go into the G7. So, you know, that way, if you're approaching your line, like I want my chord tone to land on the third of the G, no matter what, you can almost play anything to get to it, you know? So don't play over every chord, or don't at least think you have to play over every chord. That would be the big one.
And then talk a little bit about common tones, common chord tones.
Right, exactly.
Changes.
Common tones, exactly. Yeah, so if I was playing over A minor 7, going to D9, right? Just from the visual of the chord, you know, I can see those two notes are in both chords, right? And then I might say, okay, well, which note's actually changing? I can see this G in the A minor 7 chord is dropping down to an F sharp. So if those two notes are the same and I played, all I had to do was change one note, and you could kind of hear the chord change, couldn't you? Just from that one note. So, you know, visually look for common tones in the chords, and then you can base a line around keeping those static and then making the other note change, the note that's actually moving in the chord.
Great answer, man. All right, I have a big announcement. You ready?
Yep. England?
England.
Yes.
Bob Evans Music from... He says, hello, I am in the UK.
Yay. Hello, Bob.
Awesome. Okay. Another good question here. Could you talk about doing, like motific development, a motif, and developing them without a cat running after his tail?
Okay, so
so like with chord tone soloing, how would you apply, motivic development or building on a motif?
Right.
And could you demonstrate that over a track too?
Well, I think in a way that one we did earlier was a good example of that. The idea that when we played the A to the E chord, I had this. Because this idea of playing the C sharp to the E sets up the next chord, and then back to the C sharp to the A sets up the next chord after that. You know, so I think part of developing a motif is thinking of it in terms of blues phrasing. And what do blues players do? They tend to play an opening phrase, right, and then they tend to play an answer to that, and then go back to the opening phrase, maybe with an embellishment or a change, so that it sounds like, I think I'm a little out of tune, so that it sounds like the phrase is actually developing, you know? It's like what you want to do is have whatever you play be connected to what you just played before. And blues is a great way to practice that because you've only got 3 chords, you know? So playing some sort of motif. Another thing about motifs is they don't have to be the notes themselves. They can be the rhythm. Like if I played an opening blues statement and I went, and then played something else, then let's say we go to the 4 chord and I go, now that's different notes, but that same ba 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 ba, you know, it was the same rhythm or close to it as the first one I played. So motifs can be rhythmic as well as the actual harmony you use. You know, if you played a song you know the rhythm too well, playing the wrong notes, somebody would recognize the song. If you play the right rhythm, you know, the song still comes through. Whereas if you play the right notes and the wrong rhythm, they're not going to know what the song is.
We should do another course on that as well.
That's a good one, isn't it?
That'd be a good one for you.
Yeah.
I just got a report from Sam, who's kind of moderating the chat.
Yeah.
We have another Brit, lives in London, but he's in Omaha right now.
Okay.
Not sure that counts.
Oh, it counts.
Okay, it
Expat,
counts.
come on.
Okay, there we go. We've got 2.
Yeah.
All right, man. We are running out of time. There's a lot of really good questions here, and listen, all of the questions you're asking are answered in Rob's library in one or more of these courses. You can tune in. There's a ton of free stuff on YouTube from Rob.
I also would like to point out that I publish every week a free email with practice advice,
Yeah,
motivation.
you want to get
all
on
that,
your
From my
site
website.
is
Yeah.
robgarland.net.
Yes.
Don't go to .com because
No.
that's a wedding photographer.
Yes. Yeah.
And Rob does not take wedding photos.
For the right price, but, yeah.
robgarland.net and get on that email list.
Yeah.
Check out his classroom. Check out his channel that's coming soon. And check out these courses. And even on TrueFire, all of the courses have a lot of free, full-length videos. There's a ton to be learned there. And, support the cause. Pick up 1 or 2 courses. Zach just gave you a nice 30% kind of discount. I'm not sure when that's going to expire, but no time like the present. Hey, if you're going to be gratuitous, I have to.
Why not? I was just sitting here, I was sitting here feeling impressed by it, to be honest. Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
we have time for you to tell people about your gear. Everyone always likes to know.
Yeah,
Let's
I
talk
get a lot of
about the
questions
guitar.
about this guitar particularly. So this guitar is made by Exotic, that are located in Van Nuys, California, north of LA. And basically, it's by all means, it's a Strat, but it has this flame roasted maple neck on it, which is one thing, it's really pretty. But for another thing, it's a little bit more resonant. I first found these guitars, kind of a funny story. I went to see my fellow MI teacher, Scott Henderson, at NAMM, and I popped into Scott's booth. He was at Exotic, and he was talking to someone, and I picked up one of these guitars with no intention of being interested in a guitar, and I just strummed it unplugged. And for those of you that have been to the NAMM show, it's like a war zone. It's so loud there, right? And I could actually hear the guitar unplugged, and I thought, that's incredible. So a few weeks later, I went down to the factory in Van Nuys and met the guys. They're really nice. And, and just tried out a bunch of guitars. And then they actually made 2 for me. The first one I have is number 17, one of the real early ones. This one has the serial number 666, which is bizarre. And so you would think I'd be playing a lot better for that deal that I made with the soul and all that.
Exactly.
But there we go. What's that sulfur smell? But anyway, so flamed maple neck, one piece, and it's really resonant, and I have them put no finish on the back, which is really nice and slidey. And then, everything else is made in-house there, which I really like. They wind their own pickups, vintage 50s or 60s in the humbucker, and everything. So, yeah, I really, really like this guitar a lot. It's been really, really cool. And then amp-wise, I usually use a Bogner, 20th anniversary Shiva. I'm endorsed by them, and it's purple, which I was really pleased about. I said, "There's no chance you can make it for me in purple."
We definitely refer to you as the purple cat.
Yeah, right.
You like that color, don't you?
Yeah, I do like it a lot. Yeah. So I have a purple amplifier.
And what kind of effects do you usually take out to the gig?
Usually, it's funny. I recently kind of went to a very minimal setup. So I just take a Wampler. A couple of Wampler pedals and a what's it called, the TC electronic delay, and then I always like to have a Leslie effect, and the one I'm using at the moment is the Strymon Lex. So that's pretty much it. Just pretty basic setup for gigs. I still have a lot of respect for those players, that use the volume and tone controls a lot and use their fingers a lot, because I think there's a lot of tone in the guitar. I mean, nothing against effects, but I think you can do a lot with the guitar itself.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, man. I know you have a little more work to do here in the studio.
Yep.
The intros
I've got to make
to the
tea
courses.
for everyone, for one thing.
So again, 2 new courses from Rob coming out: Chord Navigator 7ths, and Take 5 chord tone soloing. But please check out Chord Navigator triads. Those 2 courses together will unlock tons of epiphanies for you. I guarantee you that. And we really appreciate everybody's support. We know that you're chiming in. Some of you are having breakfast, dinner, midnight snacks. There's some time zones here, literally, are in the middle of the night for some folks, or ungodly
That's
hour
some dedication.
in the morning.
I admire that. That's great.
So we really, really appreciate you tuning in. We really appreciate your support of TrueFire and all of the artists we're privileged to work with. Rob, call a track and play us out, man.
Okay, why don't we play that thing we were playing right at the start, the bluesy thing.
Cool.
Do some chord tones.